Hi guys, Asmo here, and today I wanted to show you a really cool character I'm working on. This is going to be my next heister. It's going to be a very fast character with good clear, not necessarily focusing on single target damage, but it's going to be pretty tanky, so it's going to be very easy to level because you're not allowed to die in heist, so you have to be a little bit tanky. The character in question is Cast on Crit Ice Spear of Splitting. So I have planned on making this league multiple cast on crit characters because there's so many really cool ideas I want to try. And for this one, I was debating between going for wands or going for bows. I decided to start with the bows, and I'm gonna leave the wands for later. Later on, I'm gonna work on something along the lines of KB, which is Kinetic Bolt or Kinetic Blast with a Discharge and Astral Projector, or alternatively also with Vortex, which doesn't have a cooldown now, so it's great for cast and crit with Astral Projector. But for now, I'm going with the bow setup. So I leveled with the Ice Spear of Splitting, which was in my Asenav's Mark, and with Ice Shot, which was in my 1000 Ribbons. And the footage you see in the background is roughly how the character played. It was absolutely insane. This character was absolute pleasure to level. We were just going for full cold damage. The Asenav's Mark has a cooldown of 0.3 seconds. So basically, if your attack speed is slightly slower than 0.3 seconds, then every single attack is going to shoot out the spell. I have it linked now with added cold damage, increased critical strikes, and returning projectiles for some extra single target damage and extra clear. It works very nicely with Sniper's Mark. Sniper's Mark basically does similar thing to the Ice Spear of Splitting. It basically has like an inbuilt Sniper's Mark. Whenever it hits a target or it ends its journey on a wall, then it's basically going to split into multiple targets. And modifiers to additional projectiles will add the additional projectiles for the split version of it. The difference between Ice Spear of Splitting and the basic one is of course the fact that it splits toward multiple projectiles, so you have better clear, and it has higher single target base damage. It has higher base damage, but it doesn't have as much in terms of like critical strike multiplier, right? So for crit, the crit multi is really high for the regular Ice Spear. For this one, we don't have as much crit multi, but I want the clear and I want the base damage. It also has higher effectiveness of added damage, I think. So this is a very, very cool looking skill. We're gonna show multiple setups in a moment. So that's what I had. And then in 1000 Ribbons, I just had like regular leveling for Ice Shots. So you have added cold, you have like a volley, you can have faster attacks, you can have Mirage Archer, all that good stuff. And I was basically leveling with that. I still have most of my leveling gear on. You can see I have a Mage Blood here, but I have 7 League Steps. I have like gloves that are basically from the vendor. We have like off the ground quiver. We have Thessalios Sign, Praxis, still the 1000 Ribbons, Asenavs, and then the bow I just put on at like level 71. Some bow that I got to just put some custom crit on it, and that's it, just to test the custom crit setup. Right now the character is I think at 85% crit, so it doesn't crit every single time, but it's enough to show how it works and to compare the different setups. So that's what we're working with in terms of the gear, and in terms of the passive, I'm prioritizing a lot movement speed, just getting some basic crit accuracy, some extra survivability, some extra cold damage increase. The end setup will look very different. Again, the character is still not fully set up. I'm going to be going for charms. There's a lot of different charms that we can benefit. The extra ricochet, onslaught effect, because we want to go fast. And then the Deadeye Ascendancy is perfect for this. We want generic projectiles, which will apply to our spell and our triggering attack. So that's why Endless Munitions is amazing for this. Ricochet for the chain, again, works for the projectiles that trigger and for the projectiles that are the result of the trigger from the Ice Spear. Focal Point also increases the effect of the marks, which is amazing for Sniper's Mark. Also creates more projectiles, and then Gathering Winds for some extra speed. This is a perfect ascendancy for this type of a setup. If you're doing a projectile attack that then shoots projectile spells, this is going to be great. It also helps me get a little bit of accuracy. We get generic projectile damage. Again, this does not only apply to attacks, applies to actual spell, which is amazing because we are definitely lacking in terms of increased damage on this type of a setup because we're very far from nodes like this. This is not what I'm going to be picking up in the end game. I might anointed breath of rhyme, and I might go for like a small thread of hope here to pick up Winter's Embrace for the freeze, and then this thread of hope would allow me to also pick up Whispers of Doom, Throat Seeker for crit multi, a Glacial Cage maybe, and this would be a really cool setup where we would still be focusing on Cluster Jewel in here and then Cluster Jewel in here, so we can pick up all this move speed. Right now I'm speccing into a lot of projectile speed and testing how that affects the build. Definitely works very well. So let's jump into some maps and show how the setup looks like, I guess. So we're jumping into like some T10, whatever yellow maps, just to show how the character looks like. And the first setup I'm going to show is the Ice Shot with Chain. I think Chain is a very good candidate for something that could be run in this. This is definitely a character that will focus on clear speed, on maps, on heist, not on bossing. So let's show how this looks like. If you want to maximize your single target damage, I still have returning projectiles in my helmet setup. Oh shit, let's not die. In my helmet setup, so at least one of the returning projectiles hitting means we're getting the extra damage from it, because returning projectiles, even if you have like a billion of them, only one of them can hit the target again. Let's kill the boss. The single target damage again is not what this build focuses on. I would probably use the other Ice Spear if I was trying to do that. This one is focusing on the clear, but the clear is very satisfying. So this is basically how this works with the Ice Shot, with the chains, and this is how it looks like. It's very satisfying. We have the Herald effect for the icicles, which makes it look even better. Definitely very pretty looking skill. But let's go into the hideout, put on another map and test next setup. So the next setup I want to show is going to be returning projectiles. Okay, so let's do the Ice Shot with returning projectiles. Let's go Waste Pool or something. The returning projectiles basically allow you to hit more stuff, right? Like if you are the more times you hit, right, the less you have to focus on your attack speed, for example, right? Because it's not going to be that easy for me to scale attack speed while also scaling the movement speed, while also scaling the spell damage, the crit multi, the defenses. There's a lot of stuff that I need to scale on this character. So with returning projectiles, this should be probably one of the higher single target damage setups. Again, the character is like very scuffed, so right now the single target doesn't really mean anything, but we can compare between different setups at least how it looks like. And we freeze this guy. He doesn't get to do any attacks. We just completely freeze the boss. By the way, a lot of people don't know how freeze works, but with freeze what you want to scale is ailment duration, right? The increased effectiveness of non-damaging ailments actually doesn't do anything for freeze. It helps for your chill, but not for your freeze. If you want to make sure that you freeze bosses, then you need freeze duration, right? Because the ailment threshold is being calculated against the duration that you have of freezes, and depending on how much damage you're doing and how long is your freeze duration, that's what's going to determine whether you can freeze something or not. Certain targets are going to be immune to freezing, and for example bosses that are the pinnacle bosses are not going to be able to be permanently frozen, but they will be able to be at least slowed very much, but still have the status of being frozen. Let's check out next setup, which is going to be the Tornado Shot. So the Tornado Shot I think is probably the better one. Let's go for something like GMP. The returning projectiles doesn't work very well with this, because as you can see, it goes back and then this thing explodes, right? So we're actually going to be triggering off of these projectiles, going forwards and backwards and then forwards and then triggering. This is not a good setup. So returning projectiles is not something that you want to combine with Tornado Shot here, but let's try with the GMP, right? So we can pick up some kind of map. Let's go Bog or whatever. And this setup, it looks cool, but it's actually not the best, I think, because the extra projectiles aren't really adding that much for me, right? We are already covering so much of the screen, especially since this is supposed to be a character that will go into heist. It definitely adds more projectiles that are able to chain off the walls. Like if you look at the stuff that's going on in a place like this, in an alcove like this, you can see stuff is bouncing off the walls, and that is the chains. This is something that we can also get more chance for it to happen from the charms. And I think for the charms, I'll be going for the onslaught effect again, and I'll probably go for the chest piece with the increased onslaught effect, and we'll just scale that through the flask as well. just because that gives me movement speed and attack speed. Both are something that I really need on this character, right? Because we want to make sure that we're triggering the spell as often as possible. For the cast on crit, the base cooldown is I think 0.15, right? Without any cooldown recovery rate. And so you want to be able to attack, I think it's like 6 attacks per second or something like that. Let's go to the next setup, which I think is my favorite one, and that is the chain, right? So if we combine the tornado shot with the chain, I think this is the nicest one. Let's go coves. I'm trying to have like a mix of outdoor and indoor maps so that you can see how the skill functions, so that you can know basically how it looks like in the other. You see, it doesn't really look like. Wait, I still have GMP chain. I was gonna say this doesn't really look like we have fewer projectiles because we didn't, because we still had GMP in. But yeah, so this amount of projectiles is still completely fine, but we're not getting the negative multiplier, and the clear has wider coverage because we're able to chain. If you can also get some like chain distance, right, which we can get on the tree in here, so you can get increased projectile damage, increased chaining range. This is something that we can also try for the end setup and see how that will work with like a full ricochet to like chain off the walls and have just a maximum amount of distance that this can cover. This could be very, very good in terms of the clear. So again, the damage is not really representative of anything because the gear just on this character is still like a leveling setup. Very, very random, not something that you'll usually find, like a 1 Alk gloves and mage blood on a character. But this is the setup that I really, really like. We can also try the added cold, right? Added cold will apply to the attack as well as to the spell. And that's why I was also thinking about the wonder, because for something like kinetic bolt, you can literally scale increased spell damage, and that will increase your attack and your spell damage, right? So you can have like a hybrid type of a character. So this is without chain, and as you can see, because it's a tornado shot and it shoots another skill when it crits. So basically tornado shot itself goes around the corner, like goes to the corner, then shoots around the corner with the extra secondary projectiles, and then if it hits something and crits, it will shoot the ice spear, and the ice spear, if it hits something, it will split to further targets. So you have like an insane like around the corner coverage, right? This is incredibly good in the indoor environments. So that's why I really think like this setup could be really, really good for heist, and it feels like you don't need that much actual damage in order to scale this to have decent damage to clear heist very, very easily, right? Because the skill has very high base damage on its own, it has high amount of projectiles on its own, so you can focus on clear movement speed, you can focus on the defenses, and the character looks just to be functioning very, very well. So that's it. That's basically what I wanted to show you guys. I think it's a very cool setup. I'll be working on the POB and trying to make it into a real character. Right now, I'm not going to be sharing the POB. You can basically go off what I said and try to experiment. If you have any suggestions for what could work well on this character in terms of the supports, in terms of the items, in terms of any mechanics or passives that you think would be very interesting to try on this, you can post your suggestions in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and see you next time.